Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
I pulled into the driveway after work and froze. There it was, a neat little stack of envelopes pinned to the front door. Official looking, thick, heavy. My kid was bouncing on the porch, backpack still slung over his shoulder, oblivious to the storm brewing inside. I grabbed the mail, flipping it over in my hands. The first one was from the HOA. All sharp angles and bold letters, the kind that makes your stomach sink before you even read it. Welcome to the new neighborhood standards, it said. Effective immediately, this community is child-free. Families with children must comply within 90 days or face enforcement actions, including forced sale or eviction. I felt my chest tighten. My kid looked up at me, grinning, asking about his snack. I stuffed the envelope in my pocket, trying to act calm, but my hands were shaking. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letters, reading and rereading the rules. The fines were absurd, $500 per day for each violation. And the infractions, everything I could think of counted. Toys on the porch, crayon drawings in windows, even noise complaints from a single yell. They were laying the groundwork to make life impossible. The new board had only been voted in last month, and I didn't even know half of them. Callum Vey was the president. Smooth talking, always smiling, but I could see it in his eyes. He thrived on control. Thessaly Brine, vice president, had a sharp tongue and sharper eyes. She caught everything. Oren Quaid was quiet but calculating. Morel Kest kept mumbling about money and budgets, but the way she glanced at houses with kids? Pure malice. Jorvik Fain, he was the kind of guy who smiled while telling you your house was a hazard. The next morning, I saw them. Standing across the street, Callum and Thessaly, clipboards in hand, eyes scanning my yard. My kid was on his bike, waving happily, and I could feel my jaw tighten. Callum waved back, friendly, but there was an edge there, like he was letting me know he already had me figured out. I don't like this, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. Then you better make it look like you do, my neighbor said. He was older, thin, twitchy. They don't care if you argue. They care if you follow their rules. Rules? I asked, but my voice came out sharp. They're making these up as they go. He shrugged, shaking his head. Doesn't matter. They've got the letterhead. That's all they need. By the end of the week, notices started appearing. A small card taped to my garage said my kid's scooter was non-compliant. A colored sticky flagged the sandbox as a potential violation. I called Callum's office, trying to reason. Sir, a cheerful woman answered, probably Thessaly. We appreciate your concerns. The board's decisions are final. You have 30 days to comply or face enforcement. 30 days? That's insane, I shouted. You have 30 days, she repeated, tone sweet but sharp. Consider it a courtesy. I hung up, my palms sticky with sweat. Across the street, I saw Callum leaning on a lamppost, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. He was smiling that same easy smile. I knew he was enjoying this. That weekend, I tried to meet the other families. Everyone was tense, whispering in yards or over fences. Elara, a single mom, was beside herself. They're coming for us, all of us. I can't leave my job. I can't sell my house. We have to fight, I said. My words felt hollow even as I spoke them. We can't just let them push us out. Fight? Raffin scoffed. These people have lawyers, connections, and the board letterhead. You think a kid on a tricycle matters? I clenched my fists. It matters to me, and it matters to everyone with kids here. We spent the afternoon going house to house, talking quietly, sharing letters and notices. The tension was thick. Everyone had stories, small threats, fines, even whispered rumors of personal harassment. Jorvik had been spotted taking pictures of kids' backyards when parents weren't home. Morel had visited the same houses multiple times, scribbling on clipboards, muttering about budgets and community standards. By the time night fell, my kid was asleep. I sat on the porch, thinking. Callum's words from last week echoed in my head. Compliance is non-negotiable. I didn't even know what the next move would be when I heard the faint rustle of someone walking through the yard. My stomach dropped. A flashlight beam cut across the grass. Who's there? I yelled, jumping up. No answer, just the light moving, scanning. Then it stopped. The beam settled on the mailbox. I could see a shadow lurking behind it. I stepped closer, my heart hammering, and saw it. Another envelope, larger this time, stamped with the HOA seal. My hand trembled as I grabbed it. The words made my stomach twist. Immediate compliance required. Failure to act will result in legal action and potential eviction. I backed away, glancing over my shoulder at the darkened street. Across the way, I could just make out Callum's figure, smiling under the street lamp. Thessaly was beside him, arms crossed. Their eyes glinted. My kids stirred inside, unaware of the storm outside. I held the letter tight, thinking about what we were up against. Families being threatened, homes being targeted, our lives being dictated by a group of strangers who wanted silence, peace, and control. And then I noticed the mailbox across the street. Dozens of envelopes, all the same. I swallowed hard. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of tiny footsteps in the yard. My kid was already outside, drawing chalk pictures on the driveway. I frowned. The letters, the threats, they were supposed to scare us. But this was defiance in its purest form. Before I could say anything, the car pulled up. Black, shiny, no license plate. Out stepped Callum and Thessaly. Callum waved politely, like nothing was wrong, while Thessaly's gaze cut through the air, sharp and cold. "Good morning," Callum said, cheerfully. "Lovely day for a community inspection." "Inspection?" I repeated, my voice tight. "You've already sent dozens of notices. What more do you need?" "Standards, sir," Thessaly said, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "We need to ensure compliance. Every detail counts. Safety, presentation, conformity." I narrowed my eyes. "You're checking my kids' chalk drawings?" "Not just the chalk," Callum said, tilting his head. "The placement. It's technically an obstruction. Distracts from the curb appeal. And I believe there's a minor safety concern. Tripping hazard." My kid squealed, oblivious to the argument, hopping over a line he'd drawn. Thessaly scribbled furiously on her clipboard. "See? Documentation." I wanted to yell. Instead, I clenched my jaw and said, "You're out of your minds." Callum smiled. "Too friendly, perhaps, but the community voted for new standards. Change is never easy." I left my kid on the porch and walked to the front door, muttering to myself. Across the street, other families were peeking out. Some waved nervously. Others shook their heads. I knew what they were thinking. How far will they go? By midweek, the harassment escalated. Flyers appeared on cars. Community quiet hours now in effect. Children are a disruption. Notices were slid under doors. Play equipment is prohibited unless it meets color code number 54B2A9. Sidewalk chalk? Forbidden. Ball games? Unsanctioned outdoor activity. I read one aloud to Elara, who stared at me in disbelief. "They can't be serious," she whispered. "Color codes? Sidewalk chalk? They aren't," I said. My hands were shaking, and I think they're just getting started. I called Raffin, who had been a pillar for the neighborhood. Retired military, meticulous as hell. "They're insane," he said. "I've been through rules, regulations, even zoning. Nothing covers this. They're making it up. Then what do we do?" I asked. Raffin sighed. "Document everything. Record. Photos. Evidence. That's all we can do for now. And keep quiet about it until we know exactly what they're planning next." By Friday, the board's inspection team, Torin and Jorvik this time, were at my house. They measured the distance between my kid's swing set and the driveway. Jorvik had a laser measurer. Torin took notes, whispering numbers to himself. "Your swing set encroaches 6 inches into what we consider aesthetic alignment," Jorvik said, not even looking at me. 6 inches? I said. "That's ridiculous." "It's a violation," Torin said softly. "Documented." I could feel my blood boiling. I wanted to grab the tape measure and throw it at them. Instead, I kept my hands in my pockets. Elara called later that night. "They came by again," she said, voice shaking. "They took pictures of my kid's homework on the refrigerator. Said it was a visual disruption." I groaned. "They're insane." "I can't move," she said. "I don't have the money. And selling now? Forget it. They'll force me into bankruptcy before I even get an offer." I knew she was right. These people weren't just enforcing rules. They were weaponizing them. Every family with a kid was on edge. I started noticing neighbors peeking through blinds, whispering. Even kids who played quietly were being targeted. One afternoon, I went to the community park to meet with a few families. Callum appeared out of nowhere, standing by the sandbox, clipboard in hand. "Good to see you all enjoying public spaces," he said sweetly. "Although, technically, this area is now reserved for supervised activities only. And unsupervised children are not permitted." "Supervised?" one parent asked. "You can't just..." "Standards, ma'am," Thessaly interjected, appearing behind him like a shadow. It's for the community's well-being. Quiet, order, conformity. I stepped forward. You're harassing families. You're trying to force us out. This isn't about community standards. This is personal. Callum tilted his head. Personal? No. We're implementing policies voted in by the new board. Everyone agreed. Everyone agreed? I shouted. You don't even live here. He smiled, eyes glinting. I'm here to protect the community. Sometimes that means making tough decisions. I wanted to argue, but another parent grabbed my arm. Let's not give them a reason, she whispered. We left, walking back to our homes in tense silence. I glanced at my driveway. The chalk drawings had been erased. No note, no warning, just gone. That night, more letters appeared. Some families found eviction threats. Others received fines for visual disturbances. The language was formal, almost polite, but the intent was clear. Leave, sell, or suffer consequences. I stared at the pile of envelopes, feeling trapped. The neighborhood was already tense. Kids stopped playing outside. Parents whispered about selling, packing, moving. Every glance across the street carried suspicion. And then I noticed it. A black SUV parked on the corner, engine off. Someone inside, watching. I stepped outside, heart thudding, and the car sped off before I could see who it was. My kid peeked around the doorframe. Are they gone? I forced a laugh. Yeah, they're gone. But I knew better. This was no longer just letters, fines, or inspections. They were escalating, and I could feel, deep down, that the next move would hit harder than anything we'd seen. I woke to a stack of papers on the kitchen counter, my coffee still steaming in the mug beside them. Notices, summons, something about injunctions and fines, all in legalese that made my head spin. Raffin had warned me things were going to escalate, but seeing it in black and white made my stomach drop. The first envelope I opened was from the HOA's attorney. It read like a cold threat dressed in polite words. Immediate compliance required. Failure to adhere will result in enforcement action, including potential eviction. Legal fees will be billed to the homeowner. I slammed the paper down, my hands trembling. Across the street, I could see Callum's figure pacing on the sidewalk, phone to his ear. Thessaly leaned against a tree, eyes scanning the neighborhood. I knew exactly who he was calling. By mid-morning, the chaos had spread. Elara called, voice trembling. They just showed up at my door, took pictures of my kid's room, said it's a violation of visual standards. I don't know what to do. Document everything, I said, my voice tighter than I wanted. Take pictures, videos, notes. We need proof if this goes to court. I'm scared, she admitted. You're not alone, I said, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. Were we really going to get through this? The following day, a small group of families gathered in Raffin's garage, hushed voices bouncing off the walls. Elara, Torin, and a few others from the street were there. I laid the papers on the table. They're insane, Raffin said. There's no legal basis for this, but they're trying to wear us down. Fear, threats, constant harassment. They can't do this, Torin said, shaking his head. They're going to have to back off eventually. Raffin shook his head. Not if we let them. They're already drafting more fines, more violations. Look at this one. He held up a notice. Children's voices exceeding acceptable decibel limits during daylight hours is subject to a fine of $200 per occurrence. Elara laughed bitterly. You can't make this stuff up. How do they even measure that? They've got sound meters, I muttered. Or they rent them, or they guess. Doesn't matter. They've got the board's authority. That's all they need. We spent hours strategizing, recording, documenting. Every time one of us tried to breathe, someone would show up at a house, knocking, measuring, photographing, intimidating. A week later, I returned home from work to find Torin and Jorvik standing at the edge of my lawn. Checking compliance? I asked, bitter. Torin smiled faintly, observing, documenting. Community oversight. I narrowed my eyes. You mean harassment? Jorvik shrugged. Call it whatever you want. Rules are rules. They walked slowly down the sidewalk, measuring distances between my mailbox and the curb, snapping photos of my kid's sneakers lined up at the door. Every movement recorded, every detail noted. Inside, my kid was oblivious, building a fort with cushions. I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed hard and kept my hands clenched. That evening, a knock on the door startled me. A lawyer from the city's legal aid program was there, papers in hand. I understand the HOA has been issuing notices, she said. This is harassment, and we need to file a temporary restraining order to halt enforcement while we review your rights. Relief and panic collided. Could we really fight this? Could a restraining order stop Callum and the board? By Saturday, the first court date was set. Families shuffled into the local courthouse, nerves tight. Callum and Thessaly were there, dressed sharply, smiles like knives. They brought a stack of letters, fines, and documents claiming every house was in violation. I confronted Callum in the hallway. "You're making this personal. This isn't about standards. You're trying to push people out." He tilted his head. "We're enforcing the rules. Families with children disrupt the community. Some of you agreed to live here knowing the guidelines would evolve." Guidelines? They've never been approved. They've been voted on. The board voted. Decisions are final. I clenched my fists, my teeth grinding. Every fiber of me wanted to shove him against the wall. But I swallowed, keeping my anger in check. Every word I spoke here could be used against me in court. The hearings began, and the neighborhood's tension skyrocketed. Families testified. Evidence was presented. The board side was rehearsed, polished, intimidating. But cracks appeared. Thessaly contradicted herself on the stand about which properties were in violation. Oren's meticulous notes suddenly had gaps. Jorvik's photos looked staged. Outside the courtroom, I spoke with a few parents. Elara clutched her papers, eyes wide. "They're trying to scare us into silence," she said. "They're failing," I said, though I wasn't sure. "We just have to stay strong. Document, record, show them." Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, the board wasn't waiting. Notices piled up in mailboxes. Threats escalated. Raffin caught Jorvik taking photos of kids sneaking out to play in the yard. Callum appeared at Torin's house, pretending to be polite, but subtly warning him about fines if his grandchildren visited. At my house, the tension was unbearable. Every noise, every step on the street, felt like surveillance. My kid was starting to ask questions, eyes wide when I explained why he couldn't invite friends over. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain a grown-up group punishing kids just for being kids? Then came the call. My cell vibrated late one night. Unknown number. "Hello." A woman's voice, clipped, professional. "This is the HOA legal team. Immediate compliance is now mandatory. Failure to remove children from your property will result in an emergency hearing and potential court-ordered eviction." I dropped the phone. My kid peeked around the corner, sleepy-eyed. "Daddy, what's wrong?" I swallowed hard. "Nothing. Nothing at all." But I knew better. Nothing about this was normal anymore. The board had escalated from letters to inspections, fines, and legal threats. Families were terrified, rumors spreading like wildfire. People whispered in yards, in driveways, across fences. Some were quietly packing, selling, leaving. I sat in the dark, staring at the papers, the letters, the envelope from that evening. I could feel the walls closing in. We had documented everything, built our case, and yet the board kept moving faster than we could react. And then I noticed the black SUV parked around the corner again. Engine off. Someone inside, just watching. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone, ready to call Raffin, but before I could dial, a figure stepped from the shadows. Flashlight in hand, the beam swept across my yard, pausing on the playset, on the chalk drawings, finally resting on me. I froze. My heart pounded. They didn't speak, didn't move closer, just stared. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the figure disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with the letters, the threats, and the growing realization that the board wasn't going to stop at fines or legal action. They were planning something far worse. I met Raffin in his garage again, this time with a stack of printouts, photos, and videos. Elara and Torin were there, whispering over the evidence we'd collected. The air was thick with tension. "They can't see us doing this," Raffin said, scanning the driveway. "No cameras, no windows. If Callum or Thessaly finds out we're building a case, they'll move faster than we can react." "I've got everything," I said, tapping my phone. Photos of them measuring my yard. Videos of Oren taking notes in the neighbor's driveway. And that black SUV outside my house? Caught it on camera last night. Someone was watching us. Elara shivered. "I don't like this. They're not just following rules. They're hunting us." "I know," I said. "But we're not going to let them win. Not quietly." Our plan was simple. Document, gather evidence, and hit them where it hurt. We recorded confrontations, copied every letter, every notice, every fine. Every visit by board members was logged, filmed, and shared among the families. The next day, I saw Jorvik and Oren walking past my house, clipboards in hand. I stepped onto the porch. Phone ready. Smile for the camera, I called. They froze, glancing at each other. What are you doing? Oren asked, suspicious. Documenting your every move, I said, holding the phone steady. Just like you've done to us. Jorvik scowled. That's harassment. I shrugged. Maybe, but it's honest. And now the neighborhood is watching too. Across the street, I saw families peeking out their windows, nodding silently. The mood was shifting. Fear was still there, but it was mingled with defiance. We decided to confront the board at the next HOA meeting. Usually, they controlled everything. Callum called the shots. Thessaly did the enforcement. Oren and Jorvik documented everything, and Morel waved her financial threats around like weapons. But we had evidence now, and we had numbers. When the meeting began, the room was packed. Families crowded in, faces tense. Callum smiled, as always, confident. Welcome, he said. We're here to discuss enforcement of community standards. I stood up. You mean harassment, I said. We're not here to discuss nonsense fines or inspections. We're here to talk about real rules and the abuse of your authority. Callum's smile faltered slightly. Abuse? Our decisions are voted in by the board. Every action follows procedure. Procedure? I snapped. You're measuring 6 inches here, posting eviction notices there. You're making up rules as you go and threatening families for having kids. Thessaly leaned forward. Children are a disruption. You all agreed to live in a community where order matters. I agreed to live here, not to be terrorized, Raffin said, stepping beside me. We've documented every visit, every photo, every ridiculous fine. And now, we're sharing it with every family here. Murmurs filled the room. Families whispered, nodded, and passed around phones showing photos, letters, and recordings. The air shifted. Callum's eyes narrowed. This is manipulation. This is intimidation against the board. No, I said, voice rising. It's accountability. We've endured enough. The meeting erupted. Families shouted, arguing, pointing to their own letters and fines. Torin held up his stack of eviction threats. Look at this. Threats over grandchildren visiting. Over sidewalk chalk. You're out of control. Thessaly tried to regain composure, but her voice trembled. We're enforcing standards. Standards? Raffin said. This is harassment, and it's going to be documented in court if you continue. Morel, who had been quiet until now, slammed her ledger down. You don't understand. Budgets, fines, this is our responsibility. I leaned in, voice low but cutting. Responsibility isn't hiding behind papers while terrorizing families. You've crossed the line. Callum's face went red, and for a moment, I saw the mask slip. He looked around, realizing that the families weren't afraid anymore. The tide had shifted. By the next morning, the board was scrambling. Rumors spread that internal divisions had erupted. Thessaly argued with Callum over tactics. Oren questioned their legal footing, and Jorvik muttered about resigning if things got worse. Even Morel looked shaken, scribbling frantic notes about potential losses and lawsuits. Families began acting boldly. Parents invited neighbors over, video recording their visits, documenting harassment, and posting public complaints. Social media lit up with photos of the board's letters, measurements, and surveillance. Callum's carefully maintained image was cracking under the pressure. One evening, I spotted Jorvik skulking down the street with a camera, intending to photograph kids. I stepped in front of him. Phone raised. Caught again, I said. He froze, caught in the act. You can't do that, he said, voice shaking. Can't do what? I asked. Document harassment? Seems fair. He muttered something and hurried off. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. The board was losing control, and they knew it. That night, I gathered the evidence on my laptop, preparing to share it with every family and a few local journalists. Elara, Raffin, and Torin watched over my shoulder. This is going to hurt them, Raffin said. Not just fines or eviction threats. Their credibility, their control, it's gone. I nodded. It's time they feel the same panic we felt for months. Then, a knock at the door. My heart jumped. Midnight. Who could it be? I opened the door cautiously. A man stood there, face partially hidden by shadows, holding a folder. You're the one documenting them, he asked. Yes, I said, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. He stepped closer. Good, because you're about to see how deep this goes. There's more than just letters and fines. They've been manipulating property records, Trying to freeze families out financially? And some of their actions? Illegal. I swallowed hard. What? What do you mean? You'll see, he said, handing me the folder. Go through this. If you show the neighborhood, the board will crumble. I opened it slowly. Pages, photographs, copies of forged documents, secret inspections, everything. The board had been more corrupt than we realized. I looked up, heart racing, at Raffin and the others. We can take them down, I said. The weight of the moment hit me. Months of fear, harassment, and chaos had led to this. We weren't powerless anymore. And yet, I knew Callum, Thessaly, and the others wouldn't go quietly. The next day promised confrontation, exposure, and revenge. We had the folders spread across the kitchen table. Photos, copies of forged documents, emails, handwritten notes with dates that didn't match. It all smelled of something rotten. I felt like I was holding the proof that we weren't just fighting a mean group of people. This was deliberate. Are you sure about this? Elara asked, voice low. Yes, I said. We put it together. We recorded them. We logged visits. We have a paper trail. My hands were steady. My throat was tight. Raffin rang a lawyer he trusted. The lawyer read the files, then nodded. This is enough to file for a restraining order, fraud claims, and a motion to remove the board members for cause. We can't tear the HOA down, but we can strip the board of power. We can force new elections and bring criminal charges if the forgery checks out. Callum walked into the meeting room that night like he owned the place. He smiled at everyone. I watched him, studying his face. It didn't fool me now. We're here to keep standards, he said, voice smooth. You're here to intimidate, I said. You used forged documents to justify fines. You staged inspections. You photographed children without consent. You tried to freeze families out financially. Thessaly's mouth tightened. Torin fidgeted. Jorvik cleared his throat. Morel stared at her lap. Callum laughed once. Serious accusations. Doesn't feel funny, Raffin said. We have proof. Phones lit up. Photos passed from hand to hand. Faces went pale. Callum's confident posture shifted. I could see him searching for support. There was none left. The lawyer filed. We handed over copies to the county clerk and the local paper. The journalists smelled something big and they started asking questions. Callum and Thessaly stopped smiling for cameras. The board met in emergency session. Voices rose. Papers were slammed on tables. I stood by the back, watching them move. Eventually, under pressure and with cameras in the room, Callum resigned. Thessaly followed a day later. Torin disappeared. Jorvik tried to talk his way out. Morel looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. Resignation wasn't the same as punishment. It didn't erase the threats. It didn't pay the fines. But it cut their hands off the wheel. We still had to climb the legal mountain. The county prosecutor picked up the case after the paper ran an expose. Forged signatures, faked inspection reports, misuse of association funds. The list was long. The board members were subpoenaed. In court, Callum tried to look hurt. He said he thought he was doing right. He said he had the community's best interests at heart. Thessaly sobbed at one point and then apologized on camera. Torin kept saying he was following orders. Jorvik blamed paperwork. Morel said she never meant harm. The prosecutor didn't go easy. She had us show the evidence. She laid it out slow. Emails that contradicted testimony, bank transfers, the forged vote tallies, the fake invoices from a contractor who didn't exist. The jury watched. Faces in the gallery turned. Neighbors whispered. After weeks of testimony, the judge called it. Some charges stuck. Forgery, theft of HOA funds, conspiracy to commit fraud. A few of them faced fines and probation. A couple faced jail time. The sentences weren't enough for the rage I felt. They were enough to make them lose everything. Bank accounts frozen, homes put on notice, resumes shredded in public. They were left with empty rooms and fewer friends. The HOA didn't disappear. Rules still existed. People still argued about paint colors and mailboxes. That was the hard truth. We couldn't delete the deed restrictions. We could pry the steering wheel from the crooked hands steering it. New elections were called. Turnout was huge. The families who had been silenced filled every seat. Raffin won a board seat. Elara joined the committee for community outreach. Torin took parking oversight. The new board vowed transparency. They published minutes and receipts. They started a fund to cover legal fees for families hit by fines. They were not saints. They were tired people who had been pushed to the edge. People acted like everything was fixed. They weren't. Kids played in the yard again, but the laughter had a thin edge. Some parents signed quiet petitions. Others left quietly, shells of their old lives. People whispered about who had seen what, who had said what at the worst moments. Friendships had been torn. I went to the last hearing where the judge read the final orders against the old board. Callum sat with his head down. He looked smaller. Thessaly avoided eye contact. The rest shuffled papers. The prosecutor said the neighborhood had done what it had to do: document, report, and fight back. Outside the courthouse, a reporter shoved a microphone in my face. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I feel tired," I said. "I'm glad it's over, but not healed." My throat tightened. We won a battle. We didn't win our innocence back. People lost sleep, money, and trust. That's not coming back. The paper ran a big headline. The message spread. New residents asked about the neighborhood's history before buying. Realtors used our story to scare off some buyers. The old board's faces were plastered online. They received calls from banks, employers, and family members. Their reputations were wrecked. A few of the families who had been hurt most decided to sue the HOA itself. The law said it was complicated. The HOA was a legal entity. You couldn't just erase it. You could force changes. You could sue for damages. You could make it pay for mistakes. Those lawsuits took years. Some families settled. Some walked away with nothing after legal costs swallowed settlements. That was another hard lesson. One night, a few months later, I walked my kid to the park. Kids were there. They chased each other, shrieked, and fell into the grass. My kid laughed. It was a clean sound. I let it roll over me, then left it there. A man at the bench nodded at me. He had been one of the quiet neighbors. He had watched. He had stayed. "We did good," he said. "We did what we had to," I replied. "We had taken names. We had forced people out of power. Some paid with time behind bars. Some paid with empty bank accounts. But the HOA remained. It would always be a place for petty wars, for neighbor fights, for rules that could be twisted by whoever held the keys. We had dents and scars. The neighborhood had new rules about oversight. The new board posted videos of meetings and scanned receipts. They hired a neutral third party to audit finances. They made the meeting schedules public. They added checks and balances. They forced the HOA to change. But they couldn't erase the months when families lived under a cloud. People still flinched when a black SUV passed. Kids still asked if strangers were watching. Callum moved away. Thessaly left the state. Oren found work far from here. Jorvik's name was linked to the trial for years. Morale lost more than money. She lost a community. In the end, we survived. The children stayed. The laughter returned, but unevenly. The board was gone. The HOA was still there, quieter, healthier, and wary. No one celebrated. I tucked my kid into bed that night and listened to the faint hum of the house. He slept good. I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about what we had done and what it cost. There was relief. There was anger. There was a chronic ache that didn't go away. We had exposed them. We had stripped them of power. We had changed the rules to protect families. But the neighborhood would never be the same. We had scars on our lawns and on our hearts. Outside, the streetlight buzzed and a car passed slowly. I watched the shadow move across the blinds like an old worry. Then it was gone. I turned off the lamp and walked away. The fight had ended. The war had not.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.